It's so good to be with all of y'all. Thanks for making it here. We're excited for an hour-long community of practice event. And if this is your first time coming to any of these BioFi community of practice events, just want to extend a super warm welcome. We're so happy you're here. Every time we do one of these, we like to just share at the beginning what this community is about. And so I'm putting in the chat our purpose statement for this community, which is to cultivate and support a global community of practitioners who are designing, capitalizing, implementing, and evolving bioregional financing facilities through peer-to-peer learning and coordination. And today is probably one of the most exciting community of practice events we've had, I think, where we're actually getting to hang out and chat with those emerging bioregional financing facilities and the humans behind them. And so we hope this space can really be rich with learning, but we also want it to be a space that can kind of attune to flows of multi-capital support that might want to be happening here with folks who are showing up with questions, folks who are showing up with potential offers, and for us to hold a broad conversation about what's happening in this emerging field and how we can all play our diverse roles in it. Just to give a little sense of how today will flow, I think Samantha's actually going to lead us with just making sure you all are aware of a lot of the resources we have on our website that include some of the materials we worked through as part of the Cultivator program, but also our list of partner offerings. And so when we think about what we're doing here as the BioFi project, a lot of what we think about is cultivating this field of organizations and individuals who are either building bioregional financing facilities or see that their work in the world is to actually offer services and support to those bioregional financing facilities. So Samantha will walk through a lot of the resources that are there. And if you're, someone who thinks you have an offering for these bioregional teams, that would eventually be a great place for us to support you getting the word out. So we'll get into that, and then we'll have you all meet the teams. We'll do a quick breakout room round where there'll be a team in each breakout room, and we'll just kind of randomly pair you, and it'll be a chance to intimately chat with the teams about what their cultivator experience was like, what it was like to present, and for folks to ask questions of each other. And then we'll come back for the last probably 30 minutes as a whole, and just generate a collective conversation. Um, I'd say before I hand it to Samantha to walk through some things, I want to invite anyone who's, not actually wanting to be in a breakout room today. If you're in the middle of cooking food or caring for kids and that's not going to work for your flow today, if you could just change your name and put an equal sign in front of your name, or if that's hard to do, just say no breakout, please, in your name, and that'll help us. But of course, if you are up for that, we think that'll be one of the juiciest parts of today. Um, so I'm going to hand it over to Samantha to share a bit about the resources we've got going on, and then that'll give me some time to open up these rooms.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tyler. And yeah, I think most everyone that's here either presented a couple weeks ago in our BioFi Cultivator wrap-up presentations or tuned in or listened to the recordings of those. And if you haven't yet gotten to listen to both of the recordings, the links are available in the Luma link for this event. We also sent them out in an email, and they will soon be available on our website on the BioFi Cultivator page that we are in the process of updating right now. But if you navigate to biofi.earth, you can go to the BioFi Cultivator page, and here we already have links to the websites for all of the teams that participated in the BioFi Cultivator. So you can go there, find their contact info, learn more about those teams. And soon we will have the links to the presentations from June 10th and June 12th. And then we'll kind of break out the presentations for each team, as well as their slide decks, and have links to all of those. And while we're on the website, I also wanted to show you all the BioFi Resource Garden, which is something that we launched in March of this year, where we have been curating different resources that the BioFi project and allies and the broader BioFi ecosystem have been putting together that we think can serve bioregional organizing teams around the world. And many of these resources we drew on in the cultivator learning and design journey. So you can check out the BioFi design principles that are informed by permaculture principles and John Fullerton's regenerative economics principles and indigenous economics. The BioFi book is here in English and in Spanish. Some details on what a bioregional financing facility is, our full BioFi glossary, media, all the articles we've written, interviews that we've done, presentations that we've given, BioFi case studies. So all of the 12 case studies from the book, including on some of the teams like Regenerate Cascadia that participate in the cultivator, are available as standalone PDFs there. We have some tools and guides that we're cultivating. Our colleague Felix, who's here today, developed an amazing bioregional mapping and planning guide that we looked at in the cultivator. That's available there. We ran a Gitcoin grant round last year, and you can see all of the teams that participated in that and details on the Gitcoin round there. Funding resources, we're in the process of curating different databases of potential funders for bioregional organizing teams, and those are available there. And then I want to show us the BioFi project partner offering. So Felix was mentioning this. Organizations that want to work directly with bioregional organizing teams and have a tool, an approach, an offering that they want to share with those teams, including GMO, for instance, who's on the call today, who's developed this amazing Treecopedia that provides details on native trees that can be planted in various reforestation projects at the bioregional scale. The offerings from Sylvie and from all of these different partners are available here, as well as their contact info. So for all of the cultivator teams and for orgs out there that might be working at the global level but want to partner with bioregions, becoming a BioFi project partner is a great way to do that. So check out those resources. We'll be continuing to add to them over time. There's also a whole principles, patterns, and provocations section where we share writings from different folks that have inspired the BioFi Project's work, including our colleague and advisor, David Hankey, who's on the call today, who's been doing bioregional work since the 70s, if not since he was a small child.
Well, great. Now we are all here, and this is a chance for us to cultivate a shared conversation. And, maybe there was something really juicy and alive that was starting to brew in your breakout room. And I invite you to bring that forward here as a reflection of what you talked about, or to propose that curiosity forward for this broader group to tune into. Um, and so we'll have, 30 minutes to really be in shared conversation, chance to ask questions of the teams. I think my only request is that as you're tuning into what you might want to reflect or share, that you consider if it's really serving the whole here. And if it feels like it's actually more about a specific team and a specific nerdy item that, maybe you're the only one here who's curious about, I recommend you reach out to that team directly to have a follow-up conversation. But here, I think as a field of folks interested in building these institutions, supporting them, helping them get funded, really want to follow those threads of conversations that feel generative. So I'll leave it there and just invite anyone to come off mute if there was a thread that was really feeling alive in your breakout rooms, and we'll take it from there. And then just raise your hand with the Zoom function if you have a question or something you want to reflect into the space.
Okay, I think that there was a really good conversation. Hi. I think that there was a really good conversation in our chat about funding for communities. So specifically like I had never thought about it. I think this struck me was developing place-based funding flows, basically developing a funding model that that flows the way your community works. And I had never thought about it, but the reason I'm thinking so much about it now is I live in Kisumu, and Kisumu is a region that has hundreds hundreds of thousands of NGOs. Kenya as a whole has multiple NGOs, but yet when you look at these NGOs, you see that there's no change happening. And I think that note about place-based funding, about designing your fund to work the way the community works, the way the community flows. I'm wondering if the reason these NGOs haven't worked is they're bringing in funding models that just are not in tune with community flows. They kind of come in and they don't engage the community. They spend the way they spend money, the way they design their funding models is in a way where you have to prove yourself, when we have a community that's more based on trust. um for example, so I think that was a really good conversation to think is a really good conversation to think about, especially when you're talking about regenerative finance. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Nyami. Yeah, I'm curious if there's any teams that through this cultivator process experience themselves engaging with a lot of NGOs in a particular location, kind of weaving them into this bioregional financing vision and how that process went. Is there anyone that feels quite resonant to and wants to speak about? We'll give it a couple seconds there in case, and then we'll move on if not.
I raised my hand. I'm not a presenter, but this was such a coincidence, so I thought I would jump in. Um, and yeah, hi Nyamai. We actually have work in Kakamega, so every time we go into Kakamega, we have to fly through Kisumu. Would love to connect. We have some experience working both with NGOs as well as the sort of official local community organizations, and then last but not least with the Kenya Forest Service. So if you're interested in any of that, I'm happy to share our learnings and would love to just chat to see how we can also synergize and collaborate around Kenya and around maybe even Uganda, which is not that far away. Cheers.
Thanks, Gmo.
Thanks. Anyone else want to chime in on that question? Otherwise, I'm going to go to Steve.
Thanks so much. I was just going to say that I really appreciated the presentations in general as an expression of really early stage work that depends so much upon the spirit with which people have come to it. And I think that's what I really got out of the presentations was the spirit and the dedication and a sense of shared vision about the different relationship between people and land. And then, of course, the connection with the BioFi financing facility concept and how I think it's a very valuable sort of guidance for direction setting to think about it. I found the concept of design and stages of development and all those things so useful. And I thought that that's one of the key things I've appreciated about the BFF work and what I sensed people were doing was people stretching for being able to pace themselves with those types of thoughts about how they organize themselves.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, very, very helpful feedback. Appreciate that, Steve.
Todd, I see you were sharing a thoughtful question in the chat, and it might be connected to a conversation that was brewing with the Regenerate Cascadia folks. Do y'all want to open that conversation more? Is Todd still here? Yeah.
Yeah,
Todd?
I'm here. Sorry if there's background noise, but I'm just curious what kind of BFFs, a broad spectrum of BFFs, what type of financial kind of reporting and accountability can we begin to identify that would apply to our work here? And then kind of the follow-on question to that is, is there a capability or possibility to explore data infrastructure to support BFS in this kind of reporting? Because Claire was sharing that after the BioFi Cascadia conference, which I attended and really enjoyed, that there was a number of potential funders or investors reaching out to engage in conversation. And coming from kind of a banking background and compliance background, I'm aware of reporting and accountability standards and processes that we might need to address, and that seems to be a potential gap and an opportunity.
Cool. Thanks for that, Todd. Yeah, the way we looked at that in the cultivator is three components: governance, legal structures, and then how money flows through the governance and legal structures, and then a monitoring, reporting, and verification strategy that kind of tracks all of those flows and the multi-capital, multi-return benefits of those investments. I wonder if the Regenerate Cascadia
Yeah.
team wants to comment on that or anyone else.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind speaking to some of that just to say, so as far as we were holding this was that the at the bioregional financing facilities level, that is something that feels like it needs development, and we were considering the idea of a learning journey for the people that are starting to show interest. And in terms of your question, Todd, we are simultaneously rolling out a program that we're calling the BioRegen program that is around developing core teams and the capacities at the grassroots level to be able to flow funding to a portfolio of projects, but within the context of having done a bioregional mapping process so that there are strategic priorities that are named through participatory processes in the community, and that there is this using this principle of minimum viable process, which is sort of what is the minimum that we need to do in order to be able to hold this vision of regenerating that landscape, and that until that infrastructure is in place, it's actually really hard to set like how are you going to evaluate and measure what is important to the people of that place, and it is going to be different from place to place, and how it's measured so that it actually reflects the value that people are wanting to see returning to that place. And so we know that a lot of that might be in storytelling and in and that there are ways of it being able to show up so that so that we are respecting and building the sovereignty and agency of the people on the ground. Like that's what's really important. And how does everything else come in service to that? So I'm mentioning that because it's not a clear-cut answer. It's a process that needs to be developed. We're just creating the conditions and the supports to help have and hold those conversations um, so that that functionality is intact enough to hold what we're wanting to do. And so the bioregional financing facilities, the learning journey that we're talking about needing to be developed, actually needs to be working with those processes as they develop. So there's a kind of holding everything together in a way that there is all these learning feedbacks happening. Yeah, I don't know if that's clear and if it helped
That
answer.
was helpful. Yeah, and I appreciate kind of the emphasis on like locally defined like qualifications and metrics for success, and then yeah, holding that in integrity between people on the ground and then the this funding network, I think is going to be the challenge and the opportunity. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Todd, I think you're probably already aware, but just sharing this for other folks, and I'll drop the link in a bit. I know the folks at Refi DAO have really been testing, I forget exactly what they call it, but some sort of common reporting framework that doesn't necessarily establish a uniform reporting structure, but allows people in diverse places to come up with their own and then does some translation between them, as far as I understand it. But
Gmo's
great.
got the link here.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Gmo.
Gmo.
Yeah. So that's one we're curious about, and I think at this stage, some of the teams that have been going through the cultivator might be time to start playing with, as Claire was saying, what are the learning journeys in place that empower people to define what is the reporting they want to be doing, and that's a great place to be testing and seeing how other communities are doing it. And I'm sure the Refi DAO folks would love to be collaborating with anyone and supporting people learning about that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Binta, over to you.
So I loved everyone's comments. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that the question in the chat about, I think it was Stephen, about how has the BioFi kind of experience and the call to action influenced our work? And I think for me, what's been so incredible has been, it made me think about the region. It unlocked the energy that I was putting towards going between these different points in the region, and to think of them not as disparate in any way, but just the way that electricity became normalized to have be a flow that we access. We just like turn on a light and there's a flow that's happened at different stations along the way to make that electricity happen. Or when we turn on the faucet, we think like water is like coming from, the headwaters all the way down. So it made me think about all the flows that we're part of, and having our fund and our format of our work speak to that kind of flow, and the fact that it needs standardization, a new standard to be set so that we can access this type of capital and this type of regenerative work in a way that it's not disparate, and it's not at stations that are not connected. So it's been really incredible. And I hope that a number of the cohort, we can continue to maybe meet quarterly and actually talk about how we're actually getting these structures to happen, and the reporting of it, and the way that we connect with funders and how we become funders. So thank you so much for everything, you guys.
Thank you for that reflection, Binta, and thanks for the question, Steve. Yeah, for folks that didn't see it, Steve is kind of asking, how does the BioFi and BFF framework and the templates and the kind of journey through the cultivator, how did that shape the work you were already doing, and how you're thinking about storytelling and structuring? So if anyone else wants to weigh in on that, I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, Trisha.
Yeah, I would love to, because it's actually what brought us into the curiosity and the deep resonance with the BioFi project to begin with was reading the BioFi book. And just to state that the space that I'm sitting here in right now is our bioregional hub, or our bioregional learning center called Los Higuerones, and we have all sorts of activities that take place here. And then out of our work here, we realized that we needed like just really small amounts of funding to start to flow into our community so that we could activate more of the things that we were already activating here. So then we developed a really small flow fund. And then from there, we got involved with a project called the Commons Fund that was working on basic income for organizing groups, because we recognized that we needed a coordinated bioregional organizing team, and that we would have to support them somehow to allow the weavers to do the weaving that they were already doing. And so we had all three of these things going on. And then we read the BioFi book, and it's like, oh, the three pillars of a successful bioregional. And it was kind of like, the breadcrumbs, it was like that breadcrumb that came along and said, yes, you're on the right track. And yes, you're doing this in the right way. It was the right way for us, because it was not linear. It was just emergent, coming up with what was the natural flow that was taking place in the bioregion. So for us here at Regenerosa, it was just this beautiful merging of these two ways of looking at bioregioning, but coming together in coherence. So thanks for allowing me to share that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Trisha.
Yeah, I might build on that question too, and if there's other responses to what Steve was asking, I welcome those. But also curious for any of the teams that were through this cultivator process, if there was something you really picked up that another team was doing that you've been working
Mm,
to integrate in
good
some
question.
way into your process or into your BFF vision, I'd be super curious to hear about that too.
I I would love to say that we're working really closely with Salmon Returns and very excited about what they're doing in terms of, how that can also impact with their salmon eco credits and sort of really um, I guess in general, what the BioFi project has helped to do is to elevate the scale that we're thinking at. That this is about major infrastructure that we're building, and sort of thinking about it like almost like these are also part of the algorithms that drive either the destruction or the regeneration. And so, how can we impact that? So it's thinking at all of those different scales, but. Yeah, just to say, I don't think I have a lot to say about what that will look like with Salmon Nation, with Salmon Returns, but just so excited about what they've been developing, because we don't need to do what they're doing, and yet we can learn and benefit from the partnerships and relationships that they're developing and the systems. So it's just like it's about developing the ecosystem and how we work together and also making each other visible to each other. Like that's been a huge part of the presentations is making visible what's actually going on. So much gratitude for the depth of work that you've been doing to help reveal that.
Mm, thank you, Claire.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's other comments on Z. Is that a hand?
Yeah, I mean it's a bigger thought, but I would just say it's been interesting to track this conversation and think about, what is the relationship between like culture over generation and a sort of shift in broader consciousness, which we all know is necessary. And then, does that fit within these like traditional like impact reporting, like number of students reached, like what are their demographics, like when date, time, location reporting, like all these kind of, things that a lot of nonprofits or culture change workers kind of get saddled with and bogged down in, um, where like cultural change should ultimately be kind of self-evident over time, but then also manifest in like different types of discrete projects, things that are investment ready and are expected to generate a return, whether that's multifamily housing or community energy co-op, et cetera. So I feel like this has been useful to try to articulate like the relationships between those things, but I'm still really curious, like, how do we, like, is this a matter of streamlining reporting on the kind of like the softer human side? Is this a matter of letting go of like a kind of mindset in the funding community around like how you tracked impact and like shifting towards something different? I mean, those are kind of open questions in my mind.
Thank you, Dr. Z. I'm seeing Daniel Roth has shared a couple interesting links in the chat that I think are pretty germane to this conversation as well. So hope folks check those out. Grace.
I kind of want to riff on what Dr. Z said, and also as an outsider to BioFi community, but in the wider ecological and bioregional movement, like my impressions just watching these things. And one of the things is also like we're in an experimental phase, and a lot of experiments fail. And the whole reporting structure is like it doesn't take that into account. And then I was talking to somebody on the River Dawn project, and they were talking about like measuring water quality, air quality, people's commitments to the river. And all that is good and fine. But if upstream you've got some factory dumping into it, how are you going to say that your results as an earth regenerator reflect your work as an earth regenerator? And it's such like Dr. Z was pointing out, it doesn't even make sense, this whole measurement infrastructure. And I found watching the presentations really quite painful, honestly. I started with section 2 and not section 1, and like just the pain of watching an indigenous leader in full regalia kind of begging billionaires to give him his, his birthright, and I just saw like presentation after presentation, like we've got to fit these things in 8 minutes to beg somebody with a very gross form of power for our birthright. And I've been in these conversations, like I found myself on stage in Switzerland wearing a suit, doing these things in my 2 minutes at a fancy dinner. And it's like, there's something backwards about the relationship between the funders and the regenerators. And I'm really curious about how we can do something with that relationship, because we shouldn't, like, I don't like the idea that I'm going to spend the rest of my life begging for my birthright and my children's birthright from, like, that's what we're doing. And it's dehumanizing and it's humiliating. And how do we transform the relationship that we have to the people with money, and how do we create coalitions, because we're all hurting. It's not that they're, somehow better. I mean, they're better off somehow than we are, and they're less better off in other ways. And how do we, yeah, I just, this dehumanizing, like, you've only got 2 minutes. Yeah, thanks. That was my reflection.
Thanks for the reflection, Grace. Yeah, we hear you and we appreciate that. And we spent a fair amount of time as a cultivator community kind of tuning into the pain and the ridiculousness of 8 minutes and the framing challenge there. And at the same time, I think there was a real sense of the challenge of having to tell the story in 8 minutes is a forcing function for clarity and for organization internally. And so there's a dance there. And one thing that we knew as well is like this is a chance for first impressions, and the deepest, most impactful relationships don't happen on Zoom screens and do not happen at these events. And we've been blessed to kind of hear the stories of how these teams are doing that in their own bioregions and in their own networks. So I feel the pain and am holding that paradox of how do we tell stories? How do we, craft the attention landscape in a way that can have these needs surface without it perpetuating those divisions and those separations. So yeah, appreciate that. Do you want to say anything or should I go to Stephen?
Yeah, one other reflection just quickly that I'll share, and this warrants a much deeper discussion, is that we in the cultivator, the whole group of us, are really, trying to move beyond the traditional power dynamic of funder, fundee into relationships, reciprocal relationships, and relationships that serve healing and reconciliation, and recognizing that each of these teams has incredible gifts to share that funders would be lucky to receive and be a part of. And likewise, many of these funders have experiences that can be relevant for the BFFs that are being created. So we're trying to create more collaborative, trust-based relationships that are place-based and that are in service to the regeneration of a place that is multi-generational, multi-species in nature, and get us out of kind of our traditional power dynamics and hierarchies. And that work is diverse and emergent. But yeah, I appreciate you naming some of those dynamics that you saw.
Yeah. Stephen, over to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate Grace's comments, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. And as I was watching the presentations, I was thinking a lot about that they were very focused on, raising money, and eh, and like for good reason, and because of the urgency of the problem we face. But I think it's also important to think about how we can actually build and create wealth locally and regionally through community. Because, through, if you have a neighborhood where people are driving each other to the store and doing elder care locally, you can actually build, you can build wealth in a lot of ways. And I think in the US particularly, we don't think of it that way because
we have all these other structures which are, perform very horribly anyway, but so I think that would be like really create health by
I think we're losing you, Stephen.
it's really important to make this work. I think there's this thread going through about my back.
I think so. Could you maybe wrap it towards a
Okay.
question or a closing?
E- e- Well, I just wanted to ask a question about thinking about how to service this community, how we can change those structures to be more supportive. And I'm really curious to see how am I frozen now?
We can hear you.
Yeah, okay. And I would love to get some input from the groups of how they're thinking about getting legal services, how we can change to more of like something similar to an alternative dispute resolution model, as opposed to, the way our legal system typically works. So I'm super interested in working on that. I'd love to, um, survey people and find other people who are really interested in working on this as a group. Maybe that already exists, but I think a practice group in that area would be awesome.
Thanks, Stephen. So I think I heard it as curiosity around how teams might be working with legal services right now, and either what could be shared across teams or what does it mean to do that in a way that preserves local wealth generation. I'm not sure
Yeah,
if I captured it entirely, but
yeah, for sure. And then also how we can change like the models to be more supportive of this work. What would it mean to have a regenerative legal system?
I see.
Mm. Big
Big,
question.
yeah, yeah. I'm curious if any of the teams feel feel inspired by this question or have a story to tell. Dr. Z, I see a hand.
I'd just say, I mean, I think we have pieces of that in place. Like we talk a lot about connecting community land trusts with community development institutions, with cooperative housing models. Like we have cooperative business ventures in the network. I feel like we have a lot of the necessary legal financial architectures in front of us. What we don't have is like the majority of the circulated value going through those things. So the question is like, you know, and as one example, a longtime migrant justice organizer who's also a worker owner of a housing enterprise in northern Vermont, he just got taken off the street by ICE with his daughter, and like they're targeting leaders in that movement, and so it's like it does feel in many ways like it's not just an economic system transition we need to enact. Like there's a political economy that has created this present system, is purposefully restricting the flow of resources into particular areas and lying to people about the long-term and the immediate consequences of that model of production and its own like origin story. And yes, it's has, Grace, you brought up, like it's that violence is also internal and there's all sorts of dysfunction that come with it. So it's not like, the the class that's extracted the wealth is just necessarily living happily than everybody else. But that to me is like the central kind of rub is like we need to figure out how to, harness our collective power to realign the flows of resources into these other models of ownership and governance that we know work, but have not, been able necessarily to defend themselves pretty effectively against other extractive and violent models.
Thank you, Dr. Z. So thoughtful and thorough, as always. Binta, I see your hand, and just recognizing time, I want to invite you to share a brief reflection if that's what you have, but I don't think we have time for another question.
Thanks, everybody. I just wanted to respond to both Grace and Stephen about forums. I had the chance to be blessed by working with Salmon Return by meeting them in person. So I got to have a bioregional BioFi experience where I literally met with someone from the very top of my region, just beyond my region, and got to re-meet and meet people that I would not have met in a mingling of power and forces and intention and joy. And that mingling of people, I think that with Grace's question about funders and regenerators. I think that if we can create regenerative circles in which funders are coming as regenerators, like coming to be potential regenerators, and they're actually coming ready to actually already be investing. And that it's just a matter of the conversations that will happen. And also people who are partners and potential collaborators are also considered investors as well. People who are investing time, expertise, craft, all of these things. So I hope that that model can become something that is like, not only do we have the 8-minute presentation, which is a great focalization of energy and like it creates its own kind of intensity, which, you know, like you kind of like are a salmon going upstream. But at the same time, can we have more of a also another format that we also create where we mingle and circle together, kind of I think mirroring indigenous practices in terms of creating a circling of how funders and regenerators make a circle together. So that's kind of what came to me from all the different intentions that were laid out.
Thanks, Binta. Yeah, I love the invitation to see us all as investors in our diverse ways and uplift that value flow. Thank you. Okay, friends. Well, we are at time. We kept this one short and sweet. We're so grateful for you being here. Again, there's contact information for the teams on our website, and we'll be working to slice up all those recordings so that they'll have kind of their individual recordings shared out as well. If this is your first time, please know that there's a whole online community of about 600 folks from around the world engaging in these conversations on the BioFi community of practice. And so I put that link there in the chat. There's a map feature. You can find people right in your neighborhood that you might have never known or working on the same things you are. And then there's our calendar. We'll be running some more events this summer. And yeah, as always, reach out to us if you have a question or a sense of how you'd like to support the work of these amazing teams.
Thanks to everyone for coming today. Thanks to all the cultivator participants for sharing how it felt to kind of launch their BFFs into the world, and we'll be continuing to share back to the broader community of practice how all of their journeys are unfolding. Until soon, guys. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.